The classic turn-based RPG genre is somewhat of a double-edged sword. Games can easily fall into generic territory if they rely too much on RPG Maker-looking assets and overused RPG tropes. But if done right, they can muster a ton of nostalgia and potentially rise to god tier in gaming, up there with the golden era SNES and PlayStation 1 RPGs. To accomplish that, the devs have to find the right balance between classic and new game design in RPGs, which is not an easy task at all. So let's see how well Stegosoft Games, makers of Arafel, fare in this endeavor with their newest entry, Rise of the Third Power. Welcome to the channel, this is Reviews from the Void. Rise of the Third Power is a love letter to RPGs from the past. It takes inspiration in many of them actually, but most notably Chrono Trigger. The entire pixel art style is very similar, and just like in Chrono Trigger, it has no random encounters. Instead, you can see the enemies roaming as you explore, always being able to avoid them completely, which is great. And furthermore, the overworld is almost exactly like Chronos, with a very zoomed out camera and again, no random encounters to speak of. But what matters is that it reutilizes all these features in extremely positive ways. Of course, some will take issue with the blatant inspirations, but the game balances them out with a lot of personality of its own, especially in the battle system and story, both providing high levels of satisfaction to the player. You control a group involved with the resistance desperately trying to prevent a second Great War, and let me tell you, I fell in love with several of the characters in this cast and was really drawn in by the story, due to how well everything is written. Even the initially spoiled princess develops a great personality, showing how scrappy, humorous, and quick-witted she can be. Plus, she wields a hand cannon. We've come a long way since princesses wielding frying pans. So now let's dive deeper into each aspect of this game as we score it. Graphics and sound. As I said, the graphics are heavily inspired in the late 16-bit era, especially Chrono Trigger. This is certainly a very well made pixel art, as there is a ludicrous amount of different locations throughout the game and they spared no efforts in making each one look unique. It's amazing. Inside the battles, the sprites are more detailed and well animated, in a way that reminds me of Breath of Fire 2, including because of their diagonal positioning. But the best graphical aspects inside the battles are the fantastic looking special effects that accompany the skills and spells of each character. This immediately sets this game apart from its inspirations, as some of these effects are gorgeous. I never grew bored of looking at them, especially the critical hits that are even flashier. Outside of battle, each character has a portrait with several different expressions, which I also enjoyed as they add a lot to the moment-to-moment storytelling, even though they're not a perfect match with the pixel art. The only problem I had with the character portraits is that several characters that play important roles in the story do not feature them, so you're left wondering what they really look like. But a bigger drawback in the graphical department are the enemies. They're lacking in both design as well as animation, especially once they attack, they kinda just stand there. I get that they had to cut corners somewhere, but this was a bit too glaring. As for sound, the entire soundtrack here is excellent. Several tracks are immediately enjoyable and complement the story beats and combats incredibly well. Also, the sounds accompanying the flashy special effects are fantastic. Yeah, this gets a perfect score in sound. So for the entire category, Rise of the Third Power scores a 1.6 out of 2. Gameplay and challenge. This is where the game flies its own colors. Even though this is a traditional turn-based RPG, meaning that the enemies will wait for you to make your decisions, there is a very welcome fluid quality to the combat. That's because the battle system is very straightforward while still involving a lot of strategy, especially in boss fights. Differently from most RPGs of this kind, there is no option for normal attack or defense. You will always have to choose between the skills that each character has. Most of them will spend either energy or MP for the spellcasters, and here's one great thing about this game. You never feel like you should save your MP or energy for boss fights, because each character replenishes them automatically at the end of each turn and in other conditions. So even though you will run out of MP, you almost never have to resort to using items, because it will replenish soon, and the game ramps up the difficulty of the encounters way up to scale with this feature. Also, by using your best skills all the time, you grow used to how they work, and especially how they synergize with the skills from other characters. For instance, Corina, the dual dagger wielding thief, has a skill that can only be used when the enemy has a status effect, like bleeding. This at first feels like a weak skill, because it takes one round to make them bleed and another to use it. But other characters like the black mage Aiden, who can cast plague, and Natasha, who can mark enemies, synergize really well with this ability. So this is a great feature of this game. The team strategies you come up with to deal with a high HP boss, and how they differ from the strategy you use to manage crowds. It also helps that at any time you can switch in characters like Breath of Fire 4 to change your tactics and turn the tides in your favor. And finally, and this is a very intentional similarity with Chrono Trigger, you can also use team combos. Yeah, just like dual attacks from Chrono. They work differently though. There is a dedicated energy bar that each character has to have filled in order to use the combos, and these take longer to fill in compared to Chrono Trigger, so you can't abuse them, but they're fantastic, and yet another aspect that adds to the strategy. On the exploration side, each dungeon is very fun to explore, with keys to find in order to progress and lots of hidden items. Sometimes they are a bit too long and maze-like, but since there are no random encounters, it's not a big issue. On the challenge side, the game does provide multiple difficulties tied to the amount of grinding required, which is great, and in the normal mode, I went through the entire game without grinding at all, while still feeling challenged in many encounters, which was certainly positive. So in gameplay and challenge, this game scores a 1.8 out of 2. Bang for buck. RPGs usually provide long hours of value, but we also analyze the quality of the content in this category. Rise of the Third Power's full price is $19.99, available on Switch, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PCs through Steam, Humble Store, and GOG. The entire story will last between 35 to 40 hours, and maybe a bit more if you're trying to complete every side quest without looking up guides online. So it's a long time investment, but given that both the main story as well as the side quests are incredibly worthwhile, it more than compensates for the steep price. I am only deducting a few decimals due to the amount of repetition in encounters, where many times you'll face the exact same team of enemies several times, which rises the boredom, especially in the longer dungeons. So Rise of the Third Power scores a 1.8 out of 2 in bang for buck. The sauce. The sauce is the main aspect of any game. It's that special thing that binds all other aspects together and gives it a particular taste, resulting in much more than the simple sum of their parts, for better or worse. For sure, the best aspect in this category for Rise of the Third Power is its story, cast of characters, and their development. There's a lot to enjoy here. Each character has a deep and well thought out backstory, as they're all flawed in specific ways, which makes them complex and believable. They touch on themes of alcoholism, child maltreatment, suicidal tendencies, murder, you name it. They didn't pull any punches. It's a mature story, very well grounded and no nonsense. And it also balances those heavy themes with a lot of great humor. This game is truly funny, which makes the characters even more endearing. Their back and forth is great. Meanwhile, the overarching plot is all about the balance of power between nations, each with their own ruling system, while you are controlling a group of resistance members, intervening in their ploys and shaking up the events. In this point, Rise of the Third Power probably took a lot of inspiration from the Suikoden games, especially the original, where you also control a resistance group, but but it does this in its own way, with so much detail to the storytelling while still keeping everything grounded and believable, which I'm happy to say results in one of the best stories in RPGs. Another interesting aspect of Rise of the Third Power is that the party levels up as a unity, therefore there is no need to worry about each character's level individually, which serves this game well as you can have up to 8 characters but only 3 of them per battle at once. On the flip side, once the party levels up, you get a number of skill points to allocate as you like between the characters, improving their abilities. So they found a way to effectively keep the freedom of having favorites and improving them more, while still keeping all characters battle capable at all times, at least stats wise. They also went away with equipment, sort of. Each character has a default weapon, and later you can find a second option, and that's it for the weapons. Your only other equipment are the accessories, which level up and improve like materia from Final Fantasy VII. Your equipment stats are improved through crafting, which is a fun mechanism, but it ends up removing enjoyment from the exploration aspect. Most stuff you can find in treasure chests are junk consumables or items to sell. I prefer when you can find an awesome shield or helmet by searching, which makes the exploration more meaningful, because it gets really old when you find another sack of sundries to sell for the 100th time. On the other hand, there are several side quests to tackle, which are both meaningful to character development, especially the later ones, as well as rewarding, as that's how you get relics, which are basically passive perks to improve your party, and they make a big difference. Also, the world map exploration is great, especially once you unlock the ship. One small thing that left a very positive impression on me is how they did inns in this game. They are more meaningful than ever. You sleep to replenish your character's HP and exhaustion. That builds up the more they battle and can cause them to get injured, reducing their damage. But more than that, inside the inns you can also have meals that give temporary boosts to your stats, and they last longer if you also sleep at the inn. And each time you do, you even get to see a short scene with all the characters socializing, and they differ for each town you go. It's great. And one last thing I have to take into consideration is that due to the very nature of classic turn-based RPGs, there is a constant tedious quality involved which will be felt by many. It doesn't diminish the other aspects, but needs to be addressed. So in the end, the resulting score is a very positive 3.6 out of 4 on SOS. And so, Rise of the Third Power scores a very high 8.8 out of 10. If you like classic style turn-based RPGs, this is among the best options out there, especially due to the story, character development, and a nice battle system with great animations. Rise of the Third Power is a fantastic RPG, certainly worth playing all the way through. And that's it for the review. If you liked it, please consider subscribing to help me make more. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.